There are moments in life when silence feels heavier than noise, when your efforts are unseen, your prayers feel unanswered, and your strength feels like it's running out before the battle is even over. And in those moments, something within you begins to whisper, "Maybe I am alone in this." But listen carefully, because that whisper is a lie dressed as truth. Let me tell you a story. There was once a young traveler walking through a long, empty desert. No map, no clear direction, only footprints behind him and uncertainty ahead of him. He had been rejected by people he trusted. Doors had closed, dreams had delayed, and every step forward felt like it demanded more strength than he had left. One night, exhausted, he sat under a cold sky and said, "Maybe I wasn't meant for this journey." But what he didn't know was this: every step he had taken had already been observed. Every tear he had dropped had already been accounted for. Every time he thought he was walking alone, there was protection he couldn't see. And while he felt abandoned, he was actually being guided. Because sometimes life doesn't announce its protection with noise. It moves quietly, invisibly. Precisely. Now listen closely, not as fantasy, but as truth for your spirit. There are battles you are not meant to fight alone. There are storms you were never meant to survive by willpower alone. There are moments where something greater than your fear stands between you and destruction, not to remove your journey, but to ensure your journey does not destroy you. You see, being chosen is not about comfort. It is about assignment, and assignments attract resistance. But here is what most people never understand. When the resistance becomes strongest, it is often because your breakthrough is closest. There is a teaching hidden inside your struggle. That delay you are crying over, it is not rejection, it is protection. That closed door you keep thinking about, it may have saved you from something you were not ready to carry. That pain you cannot explain, it may be shaping a strength you will need for the next level. And the most powerful truth of all is this: you are not as unguarded as you feel. Even in your weakest moment, something is holding the line for you. Even in your confusion, something is arranging steps you cannot see yet. Even in your silence, your life is not unknown. Iced. But here is your responsibility in this journey. Do not quit in the middle of unseen protection, because many people give up right before the turn. They leave the field right before the rescue. They abandon the process right before the purpose reveals itself. So I want you to remember this when your mind becomes heavy again. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are not walking blind. You are being shaped in a story that is still unfolding. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply keep walking when nothing makes sense yet. Because one day, you will look back and understand. The battles you thought were breaking you were actually building you. The silence you feared was actually preparation. And the unseen hand you doubted was never absent. So stand firm, chosen one. Not because everything is easy, but because your story is still being written in ways your fear cannot understand yet. And what is defending you now is greater than what is trying to break you. There are seasons in life where everything around you becomes strangely quiet, not because life has stopped moving, but because your expectations have begun to collapse into silence. See, you pray and hear nothing. You try again and still there is no visible response. You reach out, you wait, you hope, and slowly even hope starts to feel like something distant, like a voice you once knew but can no longer recognize. In this space, the mind becomes dangerous. It begins to interpret silence as absence, delay as rejection, distance as abandonment. And this is where many begin to fall inward, not because they are weak, but because they misread the nature of silence itself. The silence before the storm is never empty. It is not a void. It is not proof that nothing is happening. It is the unseen pressure of preparation, the quiet alignment of things that cannot yet be explained. But the human heart, when left without immediate answers, begins to assume the worst. It thinks, if something powerful was truly working for me, Why can I not see it? Why does it feel like I am walking through this alone? Why does every step forward feel heavier than the last? But what if the silence is not a sign of absence, but a sign of unseen presence? There are movements in life that do not announce themselves. There are protections that do not make noise. There are interventions that never introduce themselves as miracles until after the danger has passed. In the same way that a seed does not scream while it is breaking underground, your life does not always reveal what is being built beneath the surface. Growth is not always visible. Safety is not always loud. And guidance does not always feel like guidance while you are inside it. You may be standing in a season where nothing makes sense. Doors that once seemed open are now closed without explanation. People you trusted have become distant. Opportunities you were certain about have dissolved without warning. And in the middle of all this rearrangement, your mind begins to construct a painful narrative. I am being left behind. I am not supported. I am not seen. I am not defended. But silence has a deeper language, one that does not align with fear-based interpretation. Silence often means systems are being adjusted beyond your perception. It means intersections are being redirected, connections are being restructured, timing is being recalibrated in ways your immediate awareness cannot access. What feels like stillness is often the most active unseen movement. Think about a traveler walking through fog. Their perspective, everything appears unclear, directionless, uncertain. But from above that fog, the path is already visible, already mapped, already secured. The traveler is not abandoned, they are simply inside a limited view. The danger is not the path itself, but the assumption that what cannot be seen does not exist. This is where the mind must be retrained, because not everything delayed is denied. Not everything hidden is lost. Not everything quiet is inactive. There are forces in life that operate beyond emotional visibility. They do not respond to panic. They do not reveal themselves under pressure. They unfold according to alignment, not urgency. And yet, when a person is inside the silence, they often begin to lower their expectations of protection. They begin to question whether anything is holding them at all. They start to believe that every struggle is self-managed, every obstacle is self-fought, every outcome is purely dependent on personal strength alone. But this belief, while emotionally understandable, is not the full truth of your experience. There are moments where something stands between you and what was meant to break you, without asking for recognition. There are moments where decisions are influenced in your favor before you even realize a danger was present. There are paths you avoided without knowing what was waiting on them. There are losses that felt painful at the time, but later reveal themselves as quiet redirections away from destruction you could not yet perceive. The silence before the storm often feels like nothing is happening, but in reality, everything necessary is being held in place so that what is meant for you does not arrive too early, too late, or in the wrong form. Timing is not just about speed, it is about safety. And safety often requires invisibility. In this stage, your patience is not passive. It is part of alignment. Your endurance is not meaningless. It is part of preservation. Your confusion is not evidence of abandonment. It is evidence that your current perspective is not large enough to contain the full picture of what is unfolding. Even in nature, storms do not begin without build-up. Pressure gathers, systems shift, unseen changes occur in the atmosphere long before any visible sign appears. And yet, during that build-up, nothing looks dramatic. A person standing beneath the same sky may think it is just another ordinary day, unaware of the magnitude forming above them. This is how many moments of transformation begin in human life as well. So when you find yourself in silence, do not rush to interpret it as emptiness. Do not allow fear to define what is still unfolding. The absence of visible movement is not the absence of direction. The lack of immediate answers is not the lack of protection. And the feeling of walking alone is not proof that you are unguarded. There is a deeper layer of your journey that does not reveal itself through emotion alone. It reveals itself through outcome, through timing, through eventual clarity that only arrives after the storm has passed, and the path behind you begins to make sense in ways it never did while you were inside it. And even now, while you are trying to understand why nothing is responding, why nothing is changing, why nothing is making sense, there are things being held back from reaching you too soon. There are disruptions being redirected away from your path. There are outcomes being shaped in ways that do not yet match your expectations. You are not standing in emptiness. You are standing in unseen orchestration, in a quiet formation of events that do not yet have language in your current understanding, in a space where silence is not absence but construction, where what feels like nothing is actually something too precise to be felt yet, too structured to be random, too intentional to be explained from within the moment itself. There are moments in life when you look at your circumstances and assume everything is random, as if your steps are being taken without direction, as if the world is simply reacting to your presence instead of responding to a deeper order you cannot yet perceive. But beneath what appears accidental, there are layers of movement that do not announce themselves, arrangements that do not seek attention, and alignments that do not require your awareness in order to function. Hidden hands are not a poetic illusion for comfort. They represent the reality that not everything guiding your life is visible to your senses at the moment it is happening. You often measure guidance by clarity, by how obvious the next step feels, by how quickly doors open or close in a way that makes sense to your expectations. But real direction is not always experienced as clarity. Sometimes it is experienced as confusion that later reveals itself as protection. Sometimes it is experienced as delay that later reveals itself as precision. Sometimes it is experienced as loss that later reveals itself as redirection towards something you were not yet ready to recognize as necessary. A person walking through a dense forest may believe they are alone simply because they cannot see the path clearly. But absence of visibility is not absence of structure. The path still exists even when it is covered. The direction is still there even when it is obscured. And movement is still being guided even when the traveler cannot understand how or why they are being turned away from certain directions and toward others. What feels like uncertainty is often layered instruction, shaping you through routes you would not have consciously chosen. Hidden guidance rarely matches human preference in real time. It does not prioritize comfort. It prioritizes alignment, and alignment often requires disruption of expectation. This is why certain things in your life did not work out the way you planned, even though at the time you believed they were essential for your happiness or success. In hindsight, many of those moments begin to reveal a structure you could not see while you were emotionally attached to the outcome. There are relationships that ended without explanation that later protected you from becoming someone you were not meant to become. There are opportunities that disappeared just before you reached them that later revealed risks you were not aware of. There are delays that frustrated you deeply that later positioned you exactly where you needed to be at a time you could not have predicted. None of this feels intentional while you are inside it, because intention is not always delivered in ways the human mind recognizes immediately. The idea of hidden hands is not about removing your responsibility or your effort. It is about understanding that your effort is not the only force interacting with your life. You are participating in a process that includes variables beyond your perception. Some doors close not because you failed to open them properly, but because something on the other side was never meant to receive you. Some paths feel blocked, not because you are incapable of walking them, but because walking them would have taken you into consequences you cannot yet see from your current position. There is a deeper coordination happening in the background of your experiences. It is not always gentle in how it feels. It often arrives through confusion, interruption, or unexpected redirection. But what you interpret as interference is sometimes protection in disguise. The challenge is that protection does not always feel protective in the moment it is occurring. It can feel like frustration, limitation, or even loss. Only later does the pattern begin to reveal itself. Human perception is limited to sequence, but hidden guidance operates through structure. You see events one after another, but what shapes those events may not be sequential at all. It may be layered, interconnected, and timed in ways that only make sense when viewed from a broader perspective than the one you currently occupy. This is why certain answers do not arrive when demanded, but instead arrive when they are no longer needed in the same emotional intensity as before. Timing is not indifferent, it is calculated beyond immediate emotional urgency. There are also influences in your life that redirect outcomes without announcing themselves. A conversation that changes direction unexpectedly. A meeting that gets cancelled at the last moment. A decision that feels frustrating at first but later proves essential. These are not isolated coincidences when viewed as a pattern over time. They form a web of subtle adjustments that shape your trajectory in ways you only recognize after distance has been created between you and the original moment. You may have felt at times that you were making all the wrong choices, that nothing was aligning, that your efforts were not producing results that matched your intention. But what if some of those wrong choices were actually corrections you could not interpret at the time? What if the detours were not deviations from your path, but adjustments to it? What if the structure of your life is not as fragile as it feels when you are inside uncertainty, but instead is being constantly stabilized by forces that do not require your awareness to function? There is a reason certain things never fully collapse, even when they seem close to doing so. There is a reason you were redirected at specific moments that felt inconvenient but ultimately prevented deeper complications. There is a reason some failures did not become permanent outcomes, but instead became temporary interruptions. Hidden guidance does not eliminate struggle, but it does regulate outcome. It allows pressure without destruction, delay without derailment, confusion without complete loss of direction. When you reflect on your past, you may begin to notice patterns where you narrowly avoided situations that would have altered your life in ways you could not have recovered from easily. At the time, those moments may have felt like disappointments or missed chances, but distance changes perception. What once felt like loss begins to resemble protection. What once felt like denial begins to resemble redirection. The challenge in the present moment is that you are still inside the unfolding process. You do not yet have the distance required to interpret the structure of what is happening. You are reading individual moments without seeing the architecture that connects them. And so you interpret isolated events as randomness, when they may actually be part of a coordinated sequence designed around outcomes you have not yet reached. Hidden hands do not remove your journey, they shape its boundaries. They do not eliminate your effort, why direct its impact. They do not erase your struggle, they ensure that struggle does not become destruction. And while you may not always understand the direction in real time, there is a continuity in your experiences that suggests you have not been left without influence or care. Even in the moments where everything felt disconnected and uncertain, there are moments in life when the waiting becomes heavier than the walking, when progress feels suspended in a space that neither moves forward nor fully returns to what it was before. You try to make sense of it, you analyze your efforts, you replay your decisions, and still the answer does not arrive in the form you expect. In that space, delay begins to feel like denial. The mind starts filling in the silence with doubt, convincing you that what has not happened yet will never happen at all. But what if the structure of delay is not punishment and not rejection, but something far more precise and far more protective than your immediate understanding can There is a hidden discipline in timing that does not reveal itself through emotion. Human desire operates on urgency, but life itself does not move according to urgency alone. There are layers of coordination beneath your experience that are not designed to respond to impatience, but to alignment. And alignment often requires that certain things do not arrive before you are prepared to carry them. What feels like being held back is sometimes being held together. What feels like blockage is sometimes insulation from impact you are not yet equipped to absorb. Think about how many times you once wanted something desperately, only to look back later and realize you were not ready for it. At the time, your perception was limited to desire. You saw the surface of opportunity, not its hidden weight. You saw the appeal of an outcome, not the responsibility it carried. And if it had arrived earlier, in the version of you that existed then, it might have overwhelmed your capacity rather than expanded it. Delay, in that sense, becomes a kind of invisible correction, adjusting timing so that your arrival and the opportunity do not collide in a way that causes collapse. Instead of growth, there is a protection inside postponement that does not announce itself as protection. It arrives as frustration, as waiting, as unanswered expectation. But underneath that motivational layer, there is a structure that is constantly evaluating what you can carry and when you can carry it without breaking. Some things are delayed not because they are not meant for you, but because they are being filtered through timing that ensures they do not destroy what you have not yet strengthened within yourself. You may not feel strong while you are waiting. In fact, waiting often exposes what you think you lack. It magnifies insecurity, amplifies doubt, and creates the illusion that nothing is happening. But invisibility is not inactivity. There are forms of development that only occur when external movement slows down. Just like roots grow deeper when the surface appears still, your life often develops its most important foundations in seasons where nothing visible seems to be changing. The delay is not empty space, it is structural reinforcement. There are also moments when delay functions as separation from danger you cannot yet perceive. Not every path you are prevented from taking is a loss. Some are redirections away from outcomes that would have required consequences far heavier than the disappointment of waiting. At the time, you only see the door that did not open. You do not see what was behind it fully. You do not see the complexity of what would have followed your entry. You do not see the long-term cost that was already embedded in what you thought you were being denied. It is difficult for the mind to accept protection that does not feel like protection in the moment it occurs. Human interpretation is shaped by immediate emotional feedback. If something feels good, it is labeled good. If something feels painful, it is labeled bad. But not all pain is harm, and not all ease is safety. Delay often falls into this distortion, where discomfort is mistaken for abandonment and waiting is mistaken for neglect. Yet the deeper pattern reveals something else entirely, a consistent pattern of timing adjustments that prevent premature exposure to outcomes that require preparation. You are still developing. There is also a quiet intelligence in the way certain doors remain closed, despite repeated effort. Not all persistence is meant to be rewarded with immediate access. Sometimes persistence is meant to reveal readiness. And when readiness is not yet present, delay becomes the space in which readiness is built. The closed door is not always a rejection of your value. Sometimes it is a protection of your timing. Because entry without readiness does not lead to fulfillment, it leads to fracture. And still, in the middle of waiting, doubt becomes persuasive. It tells you that nothing is being arranged, that nothing is shifting, that nothing is working in your favor. But doubt only speaks from the level of what it can see. It cannot account for the adjustments happening beyond visibility. It cannot measure the coordination of timing across events you are not yet aware are connected. It interprets stillness as absence, because it cannot perceive movement that does not announce itself. There is a deeper pattern in life where delays often precede alignment. What feels postponed is sometimes being synchronized. The elements of your future are not always ready at the same time. Certain people, circumstances, opportunities, or internal capacities must reach a specific point before convergence becomes possible. And until that convergence is ready, delay functions as a holding space, ensuring that fragmentation does not occur through premature arrival of incomplete conditions. Even in nature, timing governs survival. Seasons do not rush each other. Growth does not demand instant expansion without structure. A fruit picked too early does not lose its destination, but it loses its maturity. In the same way, certain outcomes in your life require ripening through time, not acceleration through pressure. Delay is not the absence of movement. It is movement operating at a frequency that does not align with impatience, but with completion. There are also unseen disruptions that delay and protect you from. Paths are not always as stable as they appear at the beginning. Some opportunities carry instability that only becomes visible after entry. Some situations contain consequences that are delayed themselves, unfolding only after commitment has already been made. When you are held back from such paths, it often feels like loss in the moment, but distance later reveals that what was avoided was not neutral. It was consequential in ways you were not prepared to navigate, and so you find yourself in a strange paradox where waiting feels like stagnation. Yet in hindsight, it often reveals itself as preservation. The emotional experience and the structural reality do not always match in the present tense. This mismatch is where, regarding most confusion arises. You experience the surface layer of delay, while the deeper layer operates on protection, alignment, and preparation that cannot yet be translated into immediate understanding. There is a reason certain things have not arrived yet. There is a reason certain answers have not been given. There is a reason certain outcomes remain suspended in time. And while the mind seeks closure, the structure beneath your life is not oriented toward immediate closure, but toward correct positioning. Because what arrives without alignment does not remain stable, and what arrives without preparation does not sustain itself in the form you imagine. So even when everything feels paused, even when progress feels invisible, even when your efforts seem unanswered, there is still a deeper orchestration continuing beneath what you can currently measure, adjusting, holding, redirecting, preserving pathways that you have not yet walked into, preventing collisions you cannot yet see, shaping timing in ways that only begin to make sense when the waiting itself transforms into understanding that arrives slowly, unfolding across moments that have not yet fully revealed themselves. There are battles in life that never amounts their full scale while you are inside them. You only feel fragments of them. Pressure in your chest, confusion in your thoughts, resistance in your path, and a constant sense that something unseen is pushing against your movement. And because you cannot locate the source with your physical eyes, your mind assumes you are the only one fighting. It convinces you that every struggle is isolated, every obstacle is personal, every weight is carried entirely by you alone. But not every battle is structured to be visible at the level where you are. Experiencing it, there are conflicts that exist beyond the reach of immediate perception. They are not always emotional, not always psychological, not always physical in the way you understand struggle. Some of them are systemic, layered, and interconnected with timing, direction, and outcomes that you cannot yet measure. And because you are standing inside the middle of it, you experience only the pressure, not the full architecture of what is being engaged on your behalf or around your life. It is easy to misinterpret this stage, when things feel blocked, when progress feels interrupted, when resistance sets, seems constant. The natural conclusion is isolation. You think, if I were supported, I would not feel this way. If I were protected, I would not be struggling like this. If something greater was present in my situation, surely it would be obvious by now. But this assumption is based on visibility, not reality. Not everything that defends you announces its presence through ease or comfort. There are forces that operate in silence, not because they are absent, but because their function does not require recognition in order to be effective. Protection does not always feel like protection while it is actively functioning. Sometimes it feels like delay. Sometimes it feels like resistance. Sometimes it feels like being pushed into corners where nothing seems to move. But movement is not always measured by external progress. Sometimes it is measured by what is being prevented from reaching you at the same time. Think of a situation where danger exists beyond your awareness, and something intervenes before you ever come into contact with it. From your perspective, nothing seems to have happened. You simply do not reach the situation. You simply do not encounter the outcome. You simply move past it without knowing what was avoided. In that moment, there is no visible confirmation of protection, but protection has already occurred. This is the nature of unseen defense. It does not always present itself as relief. Sometimes it presents itself as absence of catastrophe you never had to experience. When you are in the middle of your struggles, you only see what is pressing against you. You do not see what is being held back from you. You do not see what is being redirected away from your path. You do not see what is being interrupted before it becomes part of your experience. And because of that limited perspective, you assume you are unguarded. But absence of awareness is not absence of action. There is a difference between what is happening to you and what is being prevented around you. There are also battles that are not meant to overwhelm you, but to develop endurance within you. What feels like continuous resistance may actually be structured pressure designed to strengthen your response, refine your perception, and adjust your internal alignment to conditions you will face later. In those moments, it is not that you are abandoned in struggle, but that struggle itself is being regulated in intensity so it does not exceed your capacity for growth. The difficulty is real, but so is the containment around it. Yet inside the experience, containment does not feel like containment. It feels like exposure. It feels like being surrounded without support. It feels like carrying weight without relief. And so the interpretation becomes emotional rather than structural. You respond to how it feels rather than what it is doing. But not everything that feels overwhelming is uncontrolled. Some systems of pressure are calibrated, not chaotic. They are measured, not random. They are directed, not scattered. There is also a deeper element in unseen battles that involves timing. Certain conflicts are not resolved in the moment you are aware of them. They are resolved in layers you do not have access to while they are occurring. What you experience is the surface expression of a deeper process that is already in motion beyond your immediate understanding. And because you cannot see the resolution forming, you assume nothing is being resolved at all. But resolution does not always begin with visibility. It often begins beneath it. There are moments when you narrow, wisely avoid situations that would have altered your life in ways you cannot fully calculate. At the time, you may interpret these as coincidences or disappointments. A missed opportunity, a closed door, a failed attempt, a delayed response. But distance often reveals that what looked like interruption was actually intervention, redirecting you away from outcomes that carried more complexity than you could have managed in that version of yourself. Even the feeling of being alone in struggle is not always an accurate measure of your actual state. Perception in difficulty becomes narrowed. You focus on what is heavy, what is unresolved, what is visible in terms of pressure. You do not simultaneously perceive what is stabilizing your situation beneath that pressure. It is similar to standing in strong wind and only noticing resistance against your body, without recognizing the structure that prevents you from collapsing entirely under that force. There is a form of defense that does not eliminate challenge, but regulates its impact. It allows you to experience intensity without allowing it to become destruction. It allows you to pass through difficulty without being consumed by it completely. Ely. And while you are inside it, you do not always recognize the regulation because your awareness is centered on survival, not structure. But survival itself, in many cases, is evidence of protection already functioning in ways you cannot fully see. The idea that you are fighting alone is powerful emotionally, but incomplete structurally. It reduces your experience to only what is felt internally, ignoring the external and unseen adjustments that shape what reaches you and what does not. There are elements of your journey that are not under direct emotional interpretation, and yet they are still actively influencing the conditions of your experience. You are not the sole processor of everything occurring in your life. even though it feels that way in moments of pressure, and even when you cannot trace where the resistance is coming from, or why certain things keep shifting around you. The presence of structured limitation often indicates structured protection. Not everything that resists your movement is against you. Some resistance exists to prevent misalignment, to slow down entry into unstable conditions, to hold you within boundaries that preserve trajectory, even when you do not. You don't understand the purpose of those boundaries while you are inside them. There are battles that you will only fully recognize after they are over. When distance has been created between you and the intensity of the experience, only then does the pattern begin to emerge. Only then do you see what was being prevented, what was being redirected, what was being contained, what was being preserved. And what once felt like isolation begins to resemble coordination that was never fully visible at the moment it was most needed to be understood. There are moments in a person's life when everything feels suspended between what is breaking and what is being rebuilt, where the current experience does not yet reflect the future outcome, and the present tension seems to deny any promise of resolution. In that space, it becomes difficult to believe that anything is working in your favor, because what you are facing feels too immediate, too heavy, too unfiltered to be part of something meaningful or protective. Yet some of the most important outcomes in life are not revealed at the beginning of the process, nor in the middle of the struggle, but only become intelligible when enough distance has been created to understand the structure that was forming beneath your awareness all along. There is a tendency in human perception to judge situations based on their current appearance rather than their eventual function. If something feels painful, it is assumed to be purely harmful. If something feels delayed, it is assumed to be absent. If something feels unclear, it is assumed to be directionless. But life does not always present its structure in the same order that it reveals its purpose. What begins as discomfort can end as direction. What begins as confusion can end as clarity. What begins as resistance can end as refinement. And what begins as delay can end as perfect alignment that could not have occurred earlier without distortion. When you are inside the process, you are not seeing the full arc. You are experiencing segments, fragments, and isolated moments that do not yet connect into meaning. It is like holding pieces of a larger structure without seeing the complete design they belong to. And because of that, you may conclude that nothing coherent is happening, when in reality coherence is still forming beyond your current viewpoint. The final shape of events is often visible while it is still being assembled. There are paths in life that only make sense after they have been walked. Before that, they appear uncertain, inefficient, or even contradictory. You may question why certain doors did not open, why certain efforts did not succeed, why certain expectations were interrupted. But the outcome often reveals that what seemed like interruption was actually necessary sequencing. What felt like failure was actually redirection. And what felt like delay was actually alignment operating at a level deeper than immediate desire. There is a hidden intelligence in timing that does not always match emotional readiness. You may feel prepared for something before your circumstances are structured enough to support it. Or you may feel unprepared for something that is already forming around you in ways you cannot yet perceive. In both cases, the mismatch between perception and structure creates tension, and that tension is often mistaken for opposition. But not every tension is resistance. Some tension is preparation stretching you into capacity you have not yet inhabited as you move through your experiences. There are unseen adjustments happening around you, paths that are not always perceptible in real time. Certain outcomes are being softened, certain impacts are being reduced, certain directions are being redirected, and certain collisions are being avoided entirely without your awareness of what was avoided. From your perspective, it may feel like nothing significant is happening, but absence of visible disruption does not mean absence of protective arrangement. In fact, some of the most important interventions are those that prevent experiences from ever fully forming in your reality. there is also a deeper function to what eventually arrives in your life. What reaches you is not always random, it is often filtered through conditions that determine whether it can integrate safely into your path. Some things are delayed because they require conditions that are still forming. Some outcomes are withheld not as punishment, but as protection from premature arrival. And when they finally do arrive, they often feel more stable than they would have felt earlier, not because they changed, but because you changed in the waiting. What you eventually receive is not only shaped by external timing, but also by internal transformation. The same opportunity that would have overwhelmed you in one season may become manageable in another. The same connection that would have destabilized you earlier may become meaningful later. The same responsibility that once felt too heavy may become natural after experience has expanded your capacity. This is why what comes to you is not only about readiness in the world, but readiness within you as well. There are moments when life appears to hold something back, and in those moments, interpretation becomes emotionally charged. It can feel like rejection, like invisibility, like lack of recognition. But what if what is being held back is not a denial of your worth, but a calibration of timing that ensures your experiences do not arrive in a form that would distort your trajectory? Not everything that is delayed is denied, and not everything that is denied is lost. Some things are simply restructured before they can safely enter your reality, and even when you cannot see evidence of progress. Progress does not always depend on visible movement. Internal restructuring often happens without external confirmation. A foundation can be strengthened without the building changing shape on the surface. A path can be cleared without immediate arrival. A direction can be established without immediate travel. And in these unseen stages, what is being prepared may be more important than what is being currently experienced. There is also a deeper protection operating within the sequence of events you encounter. Not everything that could have happened was meant to happen. Not every path that appeared open was aligned with long-term stability. Not every delay was neutral in its effect. Some delays actively preserved you from outcomes that would have carried consequences beyond what you could have sustained at the time. From inside the moment, this is difficult to interpret because you only see the interruption, not the alternative outcome that was avoided over time. Patterns begin to emerge for those who reflect deeply on their journey. Moments that once felt like setbacks begin to resemble safeguards. Experiences that once felt like losses begin to resemble preservation. And what once felt like silence begins to resemble structure that was never absent, only unseen. The meaning of what has happened does not remain static, it evolves as understanding expands and distance allows perspective. To develop what eventually arrives in your life is not only a result of effort or desire, but also of alignment between timing, readiness, and protection. When those elements converge, outcomes tend to stabilize in ways that earlier attempts could not achieve. This is why certain things feel different when they finally arrive, not because they changed fundamentally, but because the conditions surrounding them have finally aligned with your capacity to hold them without fracture, and so the idea that nothing is being prepared for you begins to lose strength when viewed through the continuity of experience rather than isolated moments. What appears disconnected begins to form patterns. What appears delayed begins to form timing. What appears random begins to form structure. And what appears absent begins to reveal itself as present in ways that were simply not visible from within the immediate stage of the journey.